Welcome back. As Super Tuesday gets closer and closer, politics are bound to come up at your dinner table, and it's easy to focus on what divides us on the big issues. In the Pioneer Valley, there's one long-standing political divide between Hampshire and Hampden County. It's called the tofu curtain, and Western Mass News reporter Audrey Russo is raising it to see if the us versus them mentality still exists in 2020.
The tofu curtain describes the local differences between political and social ideology. The invisible line divides Hampden and Hampshire County. In Hampden County, to the south of the tofu curtain, people vote centrist and a little bit more right-wing. Up in Hampshire County, as folklore would have it, people tend to vote overwhelmingly Democratic and progressive, one might say left-wing. Somewhere along the way, somebody joked about it, and it became well-known enough to have its own Wikipedia page. But here in 2020, I wanted to know if people still feel the divide and whether or not the tofu curtain has been raised once and for all in the modern age of politics. I'm trying to do a story about politics in Western Massachusetts, and I was wondering, have you ever heard of the tofu curtain before?
What is it?
The tofu curtain?
No.
The tofu curtain?
No.
Though this voter didn't know the term.
No, not at all.
He did speak to some of the cliches the tofu curtain is based on.
Northampton's a wild place, I'll tell you that much.
To break down the concept, we spoke with Julie Walsh, a political science professor at American International College.
There's such a clearly defined boundary between these two counties that's probably what caused it to stick.
Though the tofu curtain does make the distinction between progressive politics and centrist, Walsh says both counties are supportive of the Democratic Party.
65 to 70% that vote Democrat up there, and it's about 55% here.
And Walsh says the intellectual and affluent label on Hampshire County voters, as well as the working class one for Hampden, are really just that, labels with more depth underneath.
This is a stereotype. Hampshire County has, I think, a 13% poverty rate. I think about 50% of the children in Amherst get subsidies for lunches. So it isn't this sharp divide.
More than anything, Walsh says the tofu curtain, playing on a cliche
about these vegan, vegetarian folks,
shows how communities prioritize issues when it comes to the ballot box.
There's differences in what are the most important issues to each of those groups.
Have you ever heard that phrase before, the tofu curtain?
Absolutely. I've heard it for the better part of a decade.
Anthony Signoli is a political consultant and analyst who's seen how the tofu curtain affects elections, both statewide and national.
Hampshire, Franklin, they went with Bernie Sanders. Hampden County went with Hillary Clinton in 2016. An excellent example of how sometimes on the bigger issues, the counties will split right along the lines of the tofu curtain.
Signoli says Hampden County voters tend to vote on issues that directly affect their communities.
Hampden County often is more of a local, common person mindset. Certainly in the north, legislators are fighting for their own district and their constituents, but they're thinking big picture often as well.
He says some of those big picture issues involve climate change and social reforms. And as involved as Hampshire County can be on grassroots activism,
Hampden County will outvote all the rest of the counties combined often in statewide races.
But in the 2020 race, Signoli says one thing that unites Hampden and Hampshire counties more than anything else.
They want to see Donald Trump gone.
Any Super Tuesday predictions you're willing to share?
It's tough to call. You'd have to absolutely assume that Elizabeth Warren, as long as she does well in New Hampshire and Iowa beforehand, is going to prevail.
Only time will tell how the tofu curtain will affect the 2020 presidential race. But in all elections in the future, the experts warn those political stereotypes can do more harm than good, and that maybe it's time for the tofu curtain to take its final bow.
I do think that there's vested interest in trying to get people to think of politics more as an association with a lifestyle choice, and then it's easier then to divorce the real issues from people's minds and get people to sometimes affiliate with a position that might not be in their economic best interest.
In Springfield, Audrey Russo, Western Mass News.